Chapter 18 or Book 2 Part 5. Views of distant towns, eternal half moon, ladder in place. The telephone rang at almost the exact moment I was falling asleep. I tried to ignore it, but as if it could read my mind, it kept up its stubborn ringing. 10 times, 20 times. It was never going to stop. Finally, I opened one eye and looked at the clock. Just after 6 in the morning. Beyond the window shone the full light of day. The call might be from Kumiko. I got out of bed, went to the living room and picked out the receiver. "Hello," I said, but the caller said nothing. Somebody was obviously there, but the person did not try to speak. I, too, kept silent. Concentrating on the earpiece, I could just make out the sound of breathing. "Who is it?" I asked, but the silence continued at the other end. "If this is the person who's always calling, do me a favor and make it a little later," I said. "No sex talk before breakfast, please."
"The person who's always calling?" blurted out the voice of Meik Asahara. "Who do you talk about sex with?"
"Nobody," I said.
"The woman you were holding in your arms last night. Do you talk about sex with her on the telephone?"
"No, she's not the one."
"Tell me, Mr. Windenbird, just how many women do you have hanging around you aside from your wife?"
"That would be a very long story," I said. "Anyhow, it's 6 in the morning and I haven't had much sleep. So you came to my house last night, huh?"
"And I saw you with her, holding each other."
"That didn't mean a thing," I said. "How can I put it? It was a kind of little ceremony."
"You don't have to make excuses to me," said Meik Asahara. "I'm not your wife. It's none of my business. But let me just say this. You've got a problem."
"You may be right," I said.
"You're having a tough time now. I know that. But I can't help thinking it's something you brought on yourself. You got some really basic problem, and it attracts trouble like a magnet. Any woman with any sense would get the hell away from you."
"You may be right," I said again. Meik Asahara maintained a brief silence on her end of the line. Then she cleared her throat once and said,
"You came to the alley last night, didn't you? Standing for a long time at the back of my house like some amateur burglar. Don't worry, I saw you there."
"So why didn't you come out?"
"A girl doesn't always want to go out, you know, Mr. Windenbird. Sometimes she feels like being nasty, like if the guy's gonna wait, let him really wait."
I grunted.
"But I still felt bad," she went on. "So I dragged myself all the way to your house later like an idiot."
"And I was holding the woman."
"Yeah, but isn't she kind of cuckoo? Nobody dresses like that anymore. And that makeup of hers, she is like in a time warp or something. She should go get her hair examined."
"Don't worry," I said. "She's not cuckoo. Different people have different tastes."
"Well, sure. People can have any taste they want. But ordinary people don't go that far just for taste. She's like, right out of an old magazine. Everything about her, from head to foot."
To that I did not reply.
"Tell me, Mr. Windenbird, did you sleep with her?"
I hesitated a moment and said, "No, I didn't."
"Really?"
"Really. I don't have that kind of physical relationship with her."
"So why were you holding her?"
"Women feel that way sometimes. They want to be held."
"Maybe so," said Meik Asahara. "But an idea like that can be a little dangerous."
"It's true," I said.
"What's her name?"
"Kreta Kano." Meik Asahara fell silent at her end.
"You're kidding, right?"
she said at last. "Not at all. And her sister's name is Malta Kano."
"Malta? That can't be her real name."
"No, it isn't. It's her professional name."
"What are they? A comedy team? Or do they have some connection with the Mediterranean Sea?"
"Actually, there is some connection with the Mediterranean."
"Does the sister dress like a normal person?"
"Pretty much," I said. "Her clothing is a lot more normal than Kreta's, at least. Except she always wears this red vinyl hat."
"Something tells me she's not exactly normal either. Why do you always have to go out of your way to hang around with such off-the-wall people?"
Now, that really would be a long story. If everything settles down sometime, I may be able to tell you, but not now. My head is too messed up, and things are even more messed up.
Yes, sure,
she said with a note of suspicion in her voice.
Anyway, your wife hasn't come back yet, has she?
No, not yet.
You know, Mr. Winterbird, you're a grown man. Why don't you use your head a little bit? If your wife had changed her mind and come home last night, she would have seen you with your arms locked around this woman. Then what?
True, there was a possibility.
And if she had been the one making this call, not me, and you started talking about telephone sex, what would she have thought about that?
You're right, I said.
I'm telling you, you've got a problem, she said with a sigh.
It's true, I do have a problem.
Stop agreeing with everything I say. It's not as if you're going to solve everything by admitting your mistakes. Whether you admit them or not, mistakes are mistakes.
It's true, I said. It was true.
I can't stand it anymore, said Mekasahara. Anyway, tell me, what did you want last night? You came to my house looking for something, right?
Oh, that. Never mind.
Never mind?
Yeah, finally it's. Never mind.
In other words, she gave you a hug, so you don't need me anymore.
No, that's not it. It just seemed to me. At which point Mekasahara hung up. Terrific. Mekasahara, Maltakano, Kretakano, the telephone woman, and Kumiko. Mekasahara was right. I had just a few too many women around me these days, and each one came packaged with her own special, inscrutable problem. But I was too tired to think. I had to get some sleep, and there was something I would have to do when I woke up. I went back to bed and fell asleep. When I did wake up, I took a knapsack from the drawer. It was the one we kept for earthquakes and the other emergencies that might require evacuation. Inside was a water bottle, crackers, a flashlight, and a lighter. The whole was a set that Kumiko had bought when we moved into this house, just in case the big one should hit. The water bottle was empty, though. The crackers were soggy, and the flashlight's batteries were dead. I filled the bottle with water, threw away the crackers, and put new batteries in the flashlight. Then I went to the neighborhood hardware store and bought one of those rope ladders they sell as emergency fire escapes. I thought about what else I might need, but nothing came to mind besides lemon drops. I went through the house, shutting windows and turning off lights. I made sure the front door was locked, but then I reconsidered. Somebody might come looking for me while I was gone. Kumiko might come back. And besides, there was nothing here worth stealing. I left a note on the kitchen table. Gone for a while. Will return. Tea. I wondered what it would be like for Kumiko to find this note. How would she take it? I crumbled it up and wrote a new one. Have to go out for a while on important business. Back soon. Please wait. Tea. Wearing chinos, a short-sleeved polo shirt, and the knapsack, I stepped down into the yard from the veranda. All around me were the unmistakable signs of summer, the genuine article, without reservations or conditions. The glow of the sun, the smell of the breeze, the blue of the sky, the shape of the clouds, the whirring of the cicadas, everything announced the authentic arrival of summer. And there I was, a pack on my back, scaling the garden wall and dropping down into the alley. Once, as a kid, I had run away from home on a beautiful summer morning like this. I couldn't recall what had led up to my decision to go. I was probably mad at my parents. I left home with a knapsack on my back and in my pocket all the money I had saved. I told my mother I would be hiking with some friends and got her to make a lunch for me. There were good hills for hiking just above our house, and kids often went climbing in them without adult supervision. Once I was out of the house, I got on the bus that I had chosen for myself and rode it to the end of the line. To me, this was a strange and distant town. Here I transferred to another bus and rode it to yet another strange and distant, still more distant town, without even knowing the name of the place. I got off the bus and wandered through the streets. There was nothing special about this particular town. It was a little more lively than the neighborhood where I lived, and a little more run down. It had a street lined with shops, and a commuter train station, and a few small factories. A stream ran through the town, and facing the stream stood a movie house. A signboard out front announced they were showing a western. At noon, I sat on a park bench and ate my lunch. I stayed in the town until early evening, and when the sun began to sink, my heart did too. This is your last chance to go back, I told myself. Once it gets completely dark, you might never be able to leave here. I went home on the same buses that had brought me there. I arrived before 7 and no one noticed that I had run away. My parents had thought I was out in the hills with the other kids. I had forgotten all about the particular event. But the moment I found myself scaling the wall wearing a knapsack, the feeling came back to me. The indescribable loneliness I felt, standing by myself amid unfamiliar streets and unfamiliar people and unfamiliar houses, watching the afternoon sun lose its light bit by bit. And then I thought of Kumiko, who had disappeared somewhere, taking with her only her shoulder bag and her blouse and skirt from the cleaners. She had passed her last chance to turn back, and now she was probably standing by herself in some strange and distant town. I could hardly bear to think of her that way. But no, she couldn't be by herself. She had to be with a man. That was the only way this made sense. I stopped thinking about Kumiko. I made my way down the alley. The grass underfoot had lost the living, breathing greenness it had seemed to possess during the spring rains, and now it wore the frankly dull look typical of summer grass. From among these blades, a green grasshopper would leap out now and then as I walked along. Sometimes even frogs would jump away. The alley had become the world of these little creatures, and I was simply an intruder come to upset the prevailing order. When I reached the Miyawaki's vacant house, I opened the gate and walked in without hesitation. I pressed on through the tall grass to the middle of the yard, past the dingy bird statue, which continued to stare at the sky, and walked around to the side of the house, hoping that Mei Kasahara had not seen me come in. The first thing I did when I got to the well was to remove the stones that held the cap on, and take off one of the two wooden half circles. To make sure there was still no water at the bottom, I threw in a pebble, as I had done before, and as before, the pebble hit with a dry thud. There was no water. I set down the knapsack, took the rope ladder out, and tied one end of it to the trunk of the nearby tree. I pulled on it as hard as I could to be sure it would hold. This was something on which it was impossible to lavish too much care. If by some chance the ladder somehow got loose or came undone, I would probably never make it back to the surface. Holding on the mass of rope in my arms, I began to lower the ladder into the well. The whole long thing went in, but I never felt it hit the bottom. It couldn't possibly be too short. I had bought the longest rope ladder they made, but the well was a deep one. I shone the flashlight straight down inside, but I couldn't see whether or not the ladder had reached the bottom. The rays of light penetrated only so far, and then they were swallowed up by the darkness. I sat on the edge of the well curb and listened. A few cicadas were screaming in the trees, as if competing to see which had the loudest voice or the greatest lung capacity. I couldn't hear any birds, though. I recalled the wind-up bird with some fondness. Maybe it didn't like competing with the cicadas and had moved off somewhere to avoid them. I turned my palms upward in the sunlight. In an instant, they felt warm, as though the light were seeping into the skin, soaking into the very lines of my fingerprints. The light ruled over everything out there. Bathed in light, each object glowed with a brilliant color of summer. Even intangibles such as time and memory shared the goodness of the summer light. I popped a lemon drop in my mouth and went on sitting there until the candy had melted away. Then I pulled hard on the ladder one more time to be sure it was firmly anchored. Making my way down the soft rope ladder into the well was much harder work than I had imagined it would be. A blend of cotton and nylon, the ladder was unquestionably steady, but my footing on the thing was unstable. The rubber bottoms of my tennis shoes would slip whenever I tried to lower my weight onto either leg. My hands had to keep such a tight grip on the rope that my palms started to hurt. I let myself down slowly and carefully, one rung at a time. No matter how far I went, though, there was no bottom. My descent seemed to take forever. I reminded myself of the sound of the pebble hitting bottom. The well did have a bottom. Working my way down this damned ladder was what took so much time. When I had counted 20 rungs, a wave of terror overtook me. It came suddenly, like an electric shock, and froze me in place. My muscles turned to stone. Every pore of my body gushed sweat, and my legs began to tremble. There was no way this well could be so deep. This was the middle of Tokyo. It was right behind the house I lived in. I held my breath and listened, but I couldn't hear a thing. The pounding of my own heart reverberated in my ears with such force I couldn't even hear the cicadas screaming up above. I took a deep breath. Here I was on the 20th rung, unable either to proceed farther down or to climb back up. The air in the well was chilling and smelled of the earth. It was a separate world down here, one cut off from the surface, where the sun shone so unstintingly. I looked up to the mouth of the well above me, tiny now. The well's circular opening was cut exactly in half by the half of the wooden cover I had left in place. From below, it looked like a half moon floating in the night sky.
A half moon will last for several days,
Maltakano had said. She had predicted it on the telephone. Terrific. And when the thought crossed my mind, I felt some strength to leave my body. My muscles relaxed, and the solid block of breath inside me released and came out. Squeezing out one last spurt of strength, I started down the ladder again. Just a little farther down, I told myself. Just a little more. Don't worry, there is a bottom. And at the 23rd rung, I reached it. My foot came in contact with the earth in the bottom of the well. The first thing I did in the darkness was to feel around the surface of the well bottom with the tip of my shoe, still holding onto the ladder in case there was something down there I had to get away from. After making sure there was no water and nothing of a suspicious nature, I stepped down to the ground. Setting my pack down, I felt for the zipper and took out my flashlight. The glow of the light gave me my first clear view of the place. The surface of the ground was neither very hard nor very soft, and fortunately the earth was dry. A few rocks lay scattered there where people must have thrown them. The one other thing that had fallen to the bottom was an old potato chip bag. Illuminated by the flashlight, the well bottom reminded me of the surface of the moon as I had seen it on television so long before. The well's cylindrical concrete wall was blank and smooth, with few irregularities other than some clumps of moss-like stuff growing here and there. It shot straight upward like a chimney, with a little half-moon of light at the opening far above. Looking directly up, I now could grasp how very deep the well was. I gave the rope ladder another hard tug. In my hands, it felt firm and reassuring. As long as it remained in place, I could go back to the surface any time I wanted. Next, I took a deep breath. Aside from a slight smell of mold, there was nothing wrong with the air. My greatest worry had been the air. The air at the bottom of a well tends to stagnate, and dry wells can have poison gases that seep from the earth. Long before, I had read in the paper about a well digger who lost his life from methane gas at the bottom of a well. Taking a breath, I sat on the floor of the well with my back against the wall. I closed my eyes and let my body become accustomed to the place. All right then, I thought, here I am in the bottom of a well.